Hi, this is Em, and today you might want to take a guess at what we're talking about. Yes, it's tweezers. It's one of those subjects that if you're a crafter, whether you're doing general crafts or working with pressed flowers or no matter what you're doing, I imagine a lot of you have a pair of tweezers on hand, or if you don't, probably need to think about getting a pair of tweezers because they make your life a whole lot better. And so that's what I want to talk about. I don't think it's going to be a super long video, but I do want to go into a couple of key points about tweezers. I've brought together here uh, some of the tweezers that I've accumulated over the years. And the first thing I want to talk about is where it started. For those of you that have been watching my videos, you've heard me say I've been working with pressed flowers and doing crafts since I was a teenager, and I'm basically a senior now, and so it's been a long time. And I started out with things that you bought at the store for plucking your eyebrows, and this would be an example of something from the store. And the problem with most of those, and it may not be true in all cases, is that one, a lot of times the points are very sharp, which is good for eyebrow plucking. And the tension is, there's a lot of resistance. And the reason why I started thinking about tweezers was because when I was younger, I'd spend hours and hours working with pressed flowers and so on. And my hand, my right up in here, would start getting really sore and falling asleep, and it was just extremely painful. And that was long before I ever heard the term carpal tunnel syndrome. Uh, Maybe it was out there, but when you're young and you're a teenager, you just don't really, you're not running in the circles that are talking about carpal tunnel syndrome. And so, in any event, I started looking around over the years for different tweezers. I'd go to the store and I'd go to the tweezers section and I'd start doing this with them if I could touch them. And I'm looking for things that had easy tension, that wouldn't take so much strain to put them together, because when you're holding tweezers for hours and hours, you don't realize what it's doing to your fingers and to your hand. And so then this is a little background, then I'll start going into the specific tweezers. And so then when the internet came about, and I've been on the internet ever since the days of Netscape, for those of you who remember, and AOL when that used to be a quasi browser. And the nice thing about it was I could go online and I could look for tweezers. But the problem with going online is you didn't know the tension. You might be able to see, what kind of point it had, but you didn't know what the tension was. And hopefully you could find out how long they were. But again, sometimes the description and the information was kind of sketchy. So in my quest to personally find tweezers, and if I found some tweezers I like, to maybe bring some in for my business, that became kind of an obsession. So that's why I've got all these different tweezers around. So having said all that, I'm going to go into some specifics. First of all, we'll start with things that are an aside but not particularly related to the subject of mainstream crafts, and that's these tweezers, which are copper. And then I have another pair of long tweezers, which are metal. And I actually use these in the shop as they relate to jewelry and firing jewelry, soldering jewelry, and things like that, where you need to put them in a pickle. And you don't want to use metal, regular metal, in the pickle pot, because there's a reaction that will happen. And so that's why you want copper tweezers if you're working with pickles. So that's what these are for. They're nice and long. You can get it in the pickle pot. There is a lot of resistance. I have to use a lot of pressure to put them together, but I don't use them that often. And when I do use them, I need copper, so that's not a problem. But that's what these long tweezers are for. Same thing, I use these out in the shop when I'm doing projects as they relate to metal and that kind of thing. You can see I don't worry about keeping them clean, and they're nice and long. And so these are shop tweezers. Again, they've got a lot of resistance, but I'm not working with pressed flowers and holding them together and doing things for hours and hours at a time. So when I'm doing random work where I need a specialized tweezer, these work just fine. Here's some more specialized things. This is not really a tweezer, but it's more what they use them in the medical profession. Some of you might know what these are technically called. You can leave it down in the comments section if you know. I don't know what they're technically called. But if you want something that goes together easily, these are nice, not for pressed flowers because they have serrated edges. I don't know if you can see, hopefully. These have serrated edges, but what they do work good for, and let me grab some here, is, for example, holding a stem. This is this is actually just a dried flower. And so if I was going to put some, spray it with something or dip it in some sort of, like a polycryl or something like that, this would be handy for holding them. There's no pressure on my fingers because I don't have to hold them together. And I don't care if the serration on this utensil damages anything because I'll end up cutting, just above where this is holding the flower together. So this is just, again, an aside to talk about. Something else that I have in my stash that I don't use that often, but these are floral scissors. They have on this side, they have a sharp edge so that they will cut stems, but then they're flat. And again, these are good for holding things. Let me put this cardboard down and hopefully this I can, but you can see they're flat on part of this. So if you don't want to cut the stem, which the cutter's on this side, you can hold something together here. And it doesn't take too much force to keep it together. So these are specialty scissors, but these are these are floral scissors. Flower shears is what this says on it. They're really kind of pretty. I like the ornate decoration on them. Now back to, here's another style. This is where I have two pairs. I have one with where they turn, and then I have the straight edge and the curved edge. And these are I'm using a lot of pressure to pinch them apart. And so, I wouldn't be able to use these for very long. But when you need something to pinch it together, where you just want to pinch onto something, kind of the same thing as the ones I talked about a minute ago, you can just pinch on, and you don't even have to hold it anymore. So this is nice when you want to do work where you need to hold on to something, and you don't, once you grab it, that's it. And then you can undo it. Same with these. Just grab on. So they're really handy to have around, not something that you would want to be using open for any length of time, but they're really handy, and they come in different tips. Along the lines of that, here's another one, same thing, only it's shorter, and it's got a pretty sharp tip on it, and it does the same thing as the ones that we were just talking about. Only this one's, I don't know, it doesn't, this one, see how it doesn't go apart. If I hold it way down here, it'll go way apart, but if you hold it down here, man, I can't even, I'm putting a lot of pressure on it. I can't even open it if I'm holding it down here. I have to go all the way down here to open it, and even then it's still really hard. I probably would rarely ever use these. These are just something that I have, but I don't ever use because of that. If I'm going to use a tweezer like that, I'm going to use this one because at least, even though it's hard, at least I can, well, this one still is bad. I can't open it down here, but it opens a little bit further. So there you have that. Let's see what else. Oh, here's some, I had two kinds of these. Where's the other one? Oh, here. Okay, now these are kind of nice because they have the slider on them. They stay open as opposed to these that stay closed until you open them. They're open, and then they will stay closed when you move the slider. So they really don't even take any force with your fingers this way to close them. And so you open them, you grab onto what you're working with, and then you slide the slider. If I were looking at what I was doing at the same time, and then again, you can do your work and not have to worry about it. So that's one kind of slider. And then this slider is a little bit different, same principle, only the mechanism looks a little bit different. And again, you just, I don't know, I find, why is it not sliding? Oh, here, because I'm not sliding it right. You slide it by this thing, and it's closed. And you slide it back, and it opens. So these are really handy. I use these more so than the ones that I just showed you, just because, I don't know, I don't have to use any pressure on my fingers to open them and close them. So those are handy. Now let's talk about, here's a bunch of small ones. These small ones are ones that, most of these small ones I got when I was in my quest for tweezers from the store or in little kits and things like that for eyebrows. Really hard tension, fairly sharp point, but I wouldn't use these anymore because I have tweezers in all sorts of locations in the house and the shop, etc. So that I'm never in a location that wouldn't have tweezers. But, you know, unless I'm desperate and I just have to reach, oh, I need a pair of tweezers and I can't find my regular ones, I've got these. I usually keep tweezers in cups like this. I have cups where I keep all my bunches of cups where I keep all my little tools and scissors and so on and so forth. And all my cups that I have hanging around that's how I have tweezers, so I can always grab onto them. So that's how I do that for the most part. But anyway, so back to this. So this is just different kinds of tweezers. These all have a hard tension. None of these I work with anymore. And I just strewn them around just so that I'm never without a tweezer somewhere. And most of these I think I got years and years ago at different drug and or stores that sold tweezers for women. So we'll put those out of the way. Here's another one. It's got a very sharp point. This one, the tension isn't quite as bad. And if you want something where you really need to get something that's nice and pointed, this works really well. I keep these around for use. So this would be on my yes, I would use it once in a while list. Let's see, we talked about these. Here's some other ones. I talked about those. Again, more, these are, I got these at the same time. They are stainless steel, and they're different. This is a 5, this is a 7, this is a 2A. I don't really know what that means. I just know that when I bought from this source, because I had to pay shipping, I got these online. I thought, well, I don't know what they're like. I don't know what the tips are like very well from the picture, so I'll just get a couple different kinds. These, well, sometimes I use the tweezers for leverage on stuff, and I did on these, and the tips are splayed out. So these really aren't any good for pinching anything. I ruined them. I'd have to take a pair of pliers or something, probably one of my jewelry making things that has a non-serrated edge, and put these I hesitate to move too close because see the camera blurs out. So let me back it up. But you can see how these flare out, and when you hold them together, the very tips flare out. So they're not going to hold anything by the tip. You couldn't take a splinter out of your finger or anything like that because the tips don't go together. So I got to see if I can fix it. But the tips are so nice and sharp that they're really good for splinters, but I wouldn't use them in flower work because you'd rip right through the flowers. This is really nice when you want to have a sharp tip and you need a curved edge. So this is one that I would use. The tension's really not too bad. There's a little bit of resistance, but it's not too bad. I wouldn't want to use it for, a really long time. But the shape is something that is good for certain aspects when you want that shape. And this one is another sharp point, but it's not nearly as sharp as this one. I don't know if you can tell the difference. And so I wouldn't use this too often because I have other tweezers that do the same thing. So that's this series of tweezers that I got somewhere, someday along the line. And then they come in all kinds of, we talked about the copper ones. Here's one that's plastic. I got it in some sort of, I think I got it in some sort of little clay making kit, just a real inexpensive one. It came with a bunch of plastic clay texture tools and things like that, and then it came with this pair of tweezers. So if you ever need something plastic, I do keep them around, and they don't really spread apart very much. They're not really useful for too much, but if you need them, there are plastic ones around. And we talked about these, and that one. Okay, here's another kind. It's got kind of, one's got a bent or a curved shape and one's straight. I got these at the same time because I've got both different ones. These are, see how the thickness makes it too hard to get under something that's real sheer like a pressed flower. But if you need to hold something or do something where you need the flat, wider surface, these are good. There again, it's a fair resistance. It's not as hard as some, but I wouldn't want to hold these together for a long time. But when you want something that it's kind of got a little tiny spatula-like end, these are good. So you want to think about your tips. And before I go into the ones I use all the time, let's focus on two things. Tips and tips and length. There is no right or wrong length, so just get what's comfortable for you. Probably the one thing I would say though is I found that oftentimes the longer the tweezer, sometimes the easier the tension. Maybe just because there's more length and less tightness down here. I don't know why. This is very easy tension. But let's look at the points. This one has a rounded tip, and I'm going to call it a medium rounded tip, versus this one that has a rounded tip, but the tip is I'm hoping that the camera's focusing. The tip is a little bit wider. We already talked about this one. This one is really for small, thin tip, this is my favorite tweezer for that. I've been using these for probably 20 years or more. If I ever lost this pair of tweezers, I'd be devastated. It's got low resistance to close them, for the most part. It's got the curved edge, and it's got very, very thin tips. The only thing is when I use them in pressed flower work, and I do, is it took me a long time, I've got it down now, but it took me quite a while to get used to picking up flowers so that I would not poke a hole in them. So that's the things you want to consider, and it's always good to have tweezers with different types of tips. The wider tip, the pointed tip. Something else I did, you see how this one curves in? Well, I did that myself. Actually I took this one. I think these are the same tweezers. I took this tweezer, and that's how it comes normally. And then I bent those tips together. And I'll show you what I mean. I took these and then I used my thumb and then I bent them together. And the reason why I did that is because I do a lot of varnishing and or putting things on top of flowers. And when let's say for example, I am putting some sort of matte Mod Podge or varnish on top of this flower. Well, when I pick it up, if you pick it up with this, and let's say that's wet, you see how it's going to, I don't know if you can see how, but it's going to kind of smash more down on there because it's flat. They're flat together on there. Whereas this guy, because the very tip part comes together, you can get under there and you can do more precision work. See how that... So I use these a lot when I'm, well, doing things, especially where I'm using wet mediums and I want to get it up under there. The other thing is that I like these wide roundedness because, again, if I'm using wet mediums, I often can get up under there and not even close it. See how I didn't even close that? And if you balance it just right and you get it up high enough, you can move something from point A to point B without ever having to close it. So if this is wet on the top with a wet medium, that's one of the reasons why I like the rounded one. And the other thing about it is, see how thin this metal is? It's just not, and by thin I mean from this side to this side is very thin, as opposed to, see how thick this is from this side to this side? This is way too thick in my opinion for using with pressed flower work. If you tried to take, like I just did a minute ago, where I could get up underneath here and lift it up, if I try to do that with this guy, it's not going to happen. See that? It's just going to push it. I cannot, there's no way with one hand that I could get up under there. I would have to use my other hand and probably try to figure out how to get it up under there. Here, I'll show you. I would need to give counter pressure here, and then I could get up under there. But then these are so hard to use, and so you want to think too, not only what kind of tip does it have, but how wide is the tip. And this is not good for pressed flower work. So I think that covers the main things I want to talk about: the thickness of the tip, the roundness of the tip, and then the tension, and then the length. All right, so I've exhausted that subject. So now let me talk about the ones that I use all the time. These are my go-to tweezers, and some of them I have more than one pair. Are these the same ones? Yeah, 902s. So these are actually the same, but I have more than one. And these are the same, but I bent the tips. And then these. So these are the ones that I use all the time. I probably use these the most often because it's got the nice rounded tip. They're very, very thin, super light pressure. It doesn't take hardly anything to hold them together. I can work with these for a long time. It's like an extension of my fingers. The tips are thin enough that I can just get right up under there and lift things up. All these tips are thin. This one, because how sharp the tip is, because they come to a point. Same thing, you can get up under there. Well, actually, it's taken a little bit. These get under better. This one, I can get up under there usually. Okay, but like I say, the only thing is when you have really short tips, you're gonna, especially when you're getting used to using them, you're gonna find yourself poking through a lot. But there it is. Those are my go-to tweezers that I can't live without. And let me set this down. The other honorable mention is a toothpick. Tweezers and toothpicks. If you're working with pressed flowers, you can't live without them. And this is not a go-to tweezer. See how that's just pushing that away? See? This is not a go-to tweezer. And neither was this one. This one should lift up under there and be able to pick it right up. See what a difference a tweezer makes? This one I could lift right up under there. I could never, well, I won't say never. I did get up under here. It's just a lot easier with that. But this flower, for example, is really sheer, so this would be a candidate that this would poke through, whereas the rounded ones won't. And here's an example of where if I had put some wet medium on this flower, and I'd get up under here, and then I'd pick it up by the center. But you see how if there was any wetness medium on the flower, how only the center would be being touched for being picked up, and then it would leave the back and or the front unscathed, so that you could move this from point A to point B for drying. That's what I was kind of talking about there. All right. And tweezers aren't just a consideration for pressed flowers. They also, I mean, any craft that you do, whether it's, I take a lot of times paper when I have leftover paper, and I will make shapes for crafting with. And so when you're working with these really small shapes, it's hard to get in there and just, oh, I want this thing right down here. Well, it's just very hard to get in there with my fingers. Where with tweezers, I can just move them around and go, oh, okay, I want this thing. And I can just get right up under there, and I can pick it out. Same thing, oh, I want that circle down there. So I'm going to, or I want this little round thing way down over here. I'm going to get down in here, and I can just pick it up. Okay. When I don't make a mess because I'm on camera. But see, and then I use this also as a picker-upper. I do. Tweezers are an extension of your fingers. So there's the point there. Tweezers. I'm in love with tweezers. If you never really gave a thought about the main things I talked about, please do. Save your hands. Save your, make things easier on yourself. And try to find some tweezers. Now, where to get them? Go to your well, wherever you buy tweezers for plucking, or at a craft store. And if you can touch them and see what the tension and the tips are like, then that's certainly going to be helpful, and that's the first thing that you want to do. If you can't find any that meet your needs, then you're kind of relegated to having to go online. But the problem there is you don't always know what the tension is unless you can call somebody, and good luck finding somebody that knows what they're talking about. When you say, what kind of tension does that pair of tweezers have? Is it easy tension or hard tension? They're going to kind of go, huh? This video is not to sell tweezers because I only have a couple left, but I do want to make a quick note, and I will put a link down there when I get a chance to get near the computer and update the description. I have a couple left because when I finally found tweezers, which is the ones I told you I use all the time, I went and I bought a lot. A, because I want them to last. I want to have some for the rest of my life because I never know when I'm going to get ones that I know what if they're good or not in the future. And also because I do sell pressed flowers and stuff, I did want to have some for the public to sell. But this is all I have left, and when they're gone, they're gone. And I probably won't ever be getting any more because I don't know where to get them anymore. So this one is the long one that I showed you, and then these are the shorter one, and I think on the website I've got them by number. These are 901s, and these are 902s, and then these are B4s. So these are all, I guess you'd say, M approved. For working with flowers with a good easy tension. And I already said that. I'll put a link on there. I probably am going to abscond a few more of these for me, because like I say, these got to last me the rest of my life. So there's a few left if you're interested. So just wanted to let you know. And that's that. Okay, I guess I've exhausted the subject of tweezers. Sorry if I droned on. Thank you for tuning in, and you have a wonderful day. Now I have to figure out how to close out of here. Okay, bye-bye.